Waitress spoke Arabic with a lost old man. The Sheikh saw it and ordered, "I want her for myself." The August humidity in New York City stuck to the skin like a second layer of clothing, and Emily Hayes felt every drop of sweat trickle down her back as she balanced another tray full of plates at the Alamir Grill. The aroma of Middle Eastern spices mixed with the urban chaos of Astoria, Queens, creating a unique atmosphere she had learned to call home. At 24, her steps were precise and calculated, the result of countless hours waiting tables to support a family that depended entirely on her strength. Her hands, calloused from hard work, held the tray firmly as she navigated the crowded lunch rush. Her wavy brown hair was tied up in a practical bun, a few rebellious strands framing her sweaty but determined face. Her green eyes, a legacy of the ethnic mix that ran in her veins, observed every detail of the environment with the attention of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. Every dollar counted. Every tip made a difference in the tight budget she managed with mathematical precision. The restaurant was especially busy that Friday, and Emily felt the weight of responsibility in every muscle of her body. Since her father died 9 years ago, she had become the pillar supporting not only her mother, who was growing increasingly frail from the diabetes that slowly consumed her health, but also her own dreams of graduating from law school. The night classes at the City College, paid for with great sacrifice, represented her only chance to change her family's story. Between one table and another, Emily recalled the words of her father, Amir Hayes, a Syrian who came to America as a young man in search of opportunities. Habibti, he used to say in Arabic, "Our roots are our strength, but they cannot be our chains." She grew up hearing stories of Damascus, learning the language that flowed naturally from her lips when she was emotional or tired, keeping alive a culture that many immigrants let die in the first generation. The rush began to slow after 3 in the afternoon, and Emily took the opportunity to clean the empty tables and reorganize the space. It was then that something on the sidewalk caught her attention. An elderly man, wearing clearly expensive clothes but with an expression of complete disorientation, was pacing back and forth in front of the restaurant. His fine garments contrasted with the popular environment of Astoria, and there was something in his posture that indicated not just confusion, but true despair. Emily wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out of the restaurant, approaching the man cautiously. As she got closer, she heard him murmuring words in Arabic, and her heart tightened as she recognized the helplessness in his voice. Without hesitation, she addressed him in the language she had learned from her father. "Assalamu alaikum ya ammi, hal anta bi khair?" she asked, using the respectful address she reserved for men of her father's age. The old man's eyes lit up upon hearing his native tongue from the lips of this young American woman. "Wa alaykumus salamu wa rahmatu, lahi wa barakatuh," he replied, his voice trembling with relief. "Ana ta'it ya binti, la arifu aina ana." Emily felt a pang of emotion at being called my daughter by the stranger. Gently, she offered him a chair on the restaurant's patio and brought him a glass of ice water. During their conversation, she discovered his name was Omar al-Jamil, that he had come from Lebanon to visit his son in New York, but had gotten lost after leaving the hotel alone for a walk. "My son will be very worried," Omar said, his hands shaking slightly. "He always told me not to go out alone, but I wanted to see this city he chose for his business." Emily spent the next hour talking with the elder, learning details about his life in Lebanon, his concerns about his workaholic son, his longing for his homeland. There was a natural dignity in Omar that made her treat him with the same affection she would her own grandfather. She called several hotels in the area until she found where he was staying, reassuring him that someone would soon come to pick him up. While they waited, Omar watched Emily with growing admiration. "You speak Arabic like a daughter of the East," he said, smiling. Where did you learn our language so perfectly? My father was Syrian, Emily explained, serving him a specially prepared mint tea. He used to say that language is the soul of a people, and that I should never forget where I came from, even though I was born here. Your father was a wise man, Omar replied, lightly touching her hand. Khalid, my son, needs to meet a young woman like you. He has forgotten that genuine people exist in this world. Emily smiled politely, not giving the comment much thought. She was used to older customers trying to play matchmaker or make suggestions about her personal life. What she didn't imagine was that, at that very moment, a convoy of black cars was rapidly approaching down the street, and that her life was about to take a completely unexpected turn. When the first car stopped in front of the restaurant, Emily felt a shift in the atmosphere. Men in suits exited the vehicles quickly, followed by a figure who immediately commanded all attention. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a traditional white tunic embroidered with gold that enhanced his imposing posture, the approaching man radiated an authority she had never witnessed before. Khalid al-Jamil was 32 and carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. His dark eyes swept the scene with the precision of a predator until they landed on the scene on the patio. His father, whom he had been desperately searching for the last 2 hours, sitting comfortably next to a young woman who was speaking to him in fluent Arabic as if they were old acquaintances. Khalid's first reaction was pure relief to see that Omar was safe. The second was an intense curiosity about who this woman was, who had managed to calm his father in a way that he himself rarely could. When Emily looked up and met his gaze, something electrifying passed between them, an instantaneous connection that both tried to ignore but that was deeply etched in their consciousness. Omar stood up excitedly upon seeing his son. Khalid, come meet this angel who took care of me. Emily, this is my son I talk so much about. Emily also stood, wiping her hands on her apron before extending one in a respectful greeting. It's a pleasure to meet you. Your father is a very special man, she said in English, maintaining a professional but warm tone. Khalid watched her for a moment that seemed like an eternity before replying in Arabic. Shukran jazilan li itina iki biwalidi. Thank you very much for taking care of my father. La shukra ala wajib, Emily replied naturally. There are no thanks for a duty. Her perfect fluency in the language caught him completely off guard, as did the genuine simplicity of her response. Khalid was used to being flattered, feared or desired for his power and wealth, but here was a woman who treated him with polite cordiality, nothing more. Omar broke the tense silence that had settled between his son and Emily, clapping enthusiastically. Khalid, this young woman is a treasure. She took care of me as if she were family. You must invite her to dinner with us tonight. Khalid kept his eyes fixed on Emily, studying every detail of her reaction. The way she straightened slightly, maintaining a dignified posture without showing submission, intrigued him deeply. It would be an honor, he said in English, his voice carrying a natural authority he was accustomed to using to get what he wanted. I appreciate the invitation, but I can't accept, Emily replied firmly, turning back to Omar with a warm smile. It was a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Omar. Take care of yourself and don't go out alone anymore, okay? The direct refusal hit Khalid like a punch to the gut. For years, no one had dared to refuse his invitation, especially not a woman. His first reaction was irritation, quickly followed by a burning curiosity he couldn't explain. Why not? He asked, his voice harsher than he intended. Emily looked him straight in the eye, unintimidated. Because I have to work until 7, then go to my classes, and when I get home my mother will be waiting for dinner. My life doesn't allow for social dinners, Mr. Al-Jamil. The brutal sincerity of the answer, the way she exposed her reality without asking for pity or help, left Khalid momentarily speechless. Omar watched the interaction with growing interest. recognizing something in his son's eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time. "Khalid, leave your card with the girl. Maybe another day she'll be available," Omar suggested, sensing the tension between them. "That's not necessary," Emily said politely. "If you need anything, I'll be here at the restaurant most days." Khalid pulled a business card from an inner pocket of his tunic, extending it to her. "For any eventuality," he said, his fingers brushing against hers for an instant as she took the card. The electric contact that coursed between them was undeniable, and Emily quickly pulled away, tucking the card into her apron pocket without looking at it. "Have a good afternoon," she said, turning back into the restaurant. Khalid watched her walk away with decisive steps, noticing the determination in every movement. There was something magnetic about that woman that disturbed him deeply. "Father, let's go," he said, helping Omar to his feet. "She's special, isn't she?" Omar commented on the way back to the hotel. "It's been a long time since I've seen you truly interested in someone." "I'm not interested," Khalid lied, but his mind was already making plans to return to the restaurant. In the following days, Khalid found himself making excuses to pass through Astoria. First, it was a non-existent meeting in a local office. Then, a visit to potential real estate investments in the area. He always found a reason to have lunch at Alameda Grill, watching Emily work with an efficiency that bordered on art. She greeted him politely with each visit, made courteous conversation about the food and the weather, but never showed any personal interest. This indifference began to gnaw at him in a way he hadn't experienced since adolescence. Khalid al-Jamil, accustomed to having the world at his feet, was being systematically ignored by a waitress. During one of these visits, he arrived early and found Emily helping an elderly Syrian couple who didn't speak English. She patiently translated the menu, explained the ingredients of each dish, and treated them with a genuine affection that warmed something in his chest. When she laughed at a joke the old man made in Arabic, Khalid felt a pang of something it took him a moment to recognize as jealousy. "You have a special gift with people," he commented as she passed his table. "It's not a gift, it's how I was raised," Emily replied, wiping down the next table. "My father taught me to treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are." "And who was your father?" Khalid asked, genuinely curious. Emily paused, a nostalgic glint in her eyes. "Amir Hayes. He came from Damascus in the 90s, worked as a driver his whole life to give his children an education, died of a heart attack when I was 15. The simplicity with which she told the story, without drama or self-pity, impressed Khalid. "I'm sorry," he said, and there was real sincerity in his voice. He always said that true nobility lies in character, not in birthright. Emily continued, looking him directly in the eye, that every person is worth what they do, not what they inherit. The observation struck Khalid like a targeted arrow. His entire life had been defined by the family he was born into, the empire he inherited, the surname he carried. The idea of being judged solely by his actions was both liberating and terrifying. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man," he said, his voice softer. "He was," Emily replied, and for the first time since they met, she looked at him with something beyond professional courtesy. "That's why I can recognize when someone is trying to impress with external things instead of showing who they really are." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more customers, but Emily's words echoed in Khalid's mind for the rest of the day. That night, alone in his luxurious penthouse on the Upper East Side, he found himself questioning for the first time in years who he really was, beneath all the armor of power and wealth. The next day, he arrived at the restaurant wearing simple clothes, jeans, and an unbranded button-down shirt. Emily noticed the change immediately, but didn't comment. During lunch, they talked about Arabic literature, about the differences between English and Arabic, about the challenges of immigration. Khalid discovered that Emily read Gibran Khalil Gibran in the original, that she knew the work of Naguib Mahfouz, that she had well-formed opinions on international politics. "You should be a professor, not a waitress," he said at one point. "And you should work with social development, not just accumulate wealth," she retorted without missing a beat. The response left him momentarily silent. "How do you know what I do?" "I looked you up," Emily admitted, blushing. "I wanted to know who Mr. Omar's son was. Khalid Al-Jamil, billionaire, real estate and tech investments, expanding business in Latin America. Very impressive on paper." "And in person?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. "In person, you seem like someone who has forgotten how to be truly happy," she said with an honesty that completely disarmed him. That observation haunted him for the next few days. Khalid began to realize that his visits to Alamir Grill were no longer about conquest or curiosity. They were about the way he felt when he was near Emily. She reminded him of a version of himself that existed before the responsibilities, before the expectations, before the emotional armor he had built after the failure of his arranged marriage. The change in his habits did not go unnoticed by his team. Mahmoud, his personal assistant and distant cousin, began to ask discreet questions about the frequent trips to Astoria. Khalid made up excuses, but he knew that soon someone would discover the real reason for his absences. It was during one of these visits that the situation took an unexpected turn. Emily was visibly tense, making small mistakes she never made. When Khalid asked if everything was all right, she hesitated before answering. "My mother had a crisis last night," she confessed, her voice heavy with worry. "Her diabetes is out of control, and the doctor said she needs more expensive tests that public health services don't cover. I'm trying to find a way to pay, but..." Khalid felt an immediate urge to solve the problem. "How much do you need?" he asked, already taking out his wallet. "No," Emily said firmly, stepping back. "Thank you, but I can't accept." "Why not? It's just money." "Just money," she repeated, a spark of anger in her green eyes. "To you, it might be just money, but to me, it would be a debt I could never repay. I don't want to owe favors to anyone, especially not to you." "Why especially not me?" Khalid asked, genuinely confused. Emily stared at him for a long moment before answering. "Because you're dangerous, Khalid Al-Jamil, and we both know it." Emily's words hung in the air like both an accusation and a confession. Khalid felt something shatter inside him, a carefully constructed barrier built over years that she had just destroyed with a single sentence. Dangerous. Yes, he knew he was dangerous for her, but hearing it from Emily's mouth made the reality hit him like a slap. "Emily," he began, but she had already moved away to attend to other customers, leaving him alone with his tumultuous thoughts. In the days that followed, Khalid couldn't get that conversation out of his head. For the first time in his adult life, someone had identified exactly what he represented and consciously chosen to keep their distance. Not out of fear of his power or disinterest in his wealth, but because she recognized the danger he posed to her peace of mind. This realization should have pushed him away. A rational man would have respected the boundaries Emily had clearly set and moved on, but Khalid found that he couldn't stay away from her. Each day that passed without seeing her felt longer. Each night alone in his penthouse felt emptier. He had become addicted to the way she challenged him, to the brutal honesty of her words, to the authenticity that radiated from her even in the simplest moments. It was during one of those sleepless nights that he received the call that would change everything. Mahmoud, his assistant, called at 2 in the morning, his voice filled with concern. "Khalid, I have to tell you something. Your Aunt Layla found out about your visits to Astoria." Khalid's blood ran cold. Layla Al-Jamil was the older sister of his deceased father, a feared matriarch who had taken political control of the family after her brother's death. If she had found out about Emily, it meant someone was watching him. "How did she find out?" Khalid asked, already getting dressed. She hired investigators. They have photos of you at the restaurant, talking with the waitress. Khalid, she is furious. She's already called a family meeting for tomorrow. Khalid closed his eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability. His family had tolerated his business in America, his independent decisions, even his refusal to remarry, but they would never tolerate a relationship with a woman they considered socially inferior. There's more, Mahmoud continued hesitantly. She's already done some. Investigating into the young woman, found out about the sick mother, the family's financial situation. Khalid, I think she's planning something. What kind of something? Khalid asked, though he already suspected the answer. The kind you're not going to like. The next morning, Khalid found himself sitting in the meeting room of his downtown Manhattan office, face to face with Layla Al-Jamil, a 60-year-old woman whose cold elegance masked a will of iron. She had flown in specially from Lebanon for this conversation, which in itself indicated the gravity of the situation. Khalid, she said in Arabic, her voice as sharp as a blade, you disappoint me deeply. Aunt Layla, if you came all this way to discuss my personal life— Your personal life? She interrupted, laughing humorlessly. You think you have a right to a personal life that compromises the family name? You are an Al-Jamil, Khalid. Every choice you make reflects on all of us. Khalid maintained a neutral expression, a skill he had developed since childhood to deal with family pressures. I have done nothing to compromise our reputation. Not yet, Layla said, opening a folder and spreading photographs across the table. But these images suggest you intend to. The photos showed moments Khalid thought were private. Him talking with Emily on the restaurant's patio, walking beside her on the sidewalk, the moment their hands touched when she took his card. Seen through the lens of a hired photographer, these interactions looked much more intimate than they really were. You investigated an innocent woman, Khalid said, his voice filled with a cold rage. Innocent? Layla repeated. Khalid, this woman is a waitress without a complete college education, daughter of a dead immigrant, supporting a sick mother. She has clearly identified you as a financial target. You don't know her. I don't need to know her. I know exactly who she is and what she represents, an opportunist who saw a chance to improve her life through you. Layla leaned forward. I have already offered her a generous sum to stay away from you. She refused. Khalid felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. You did what? I protected the family's interests, as I always do. I offered her $10,000 to never speak to you again. Curiously, she not only refused, but said I should be ashamed for trying to bribe someone. Layla smiled coldly. Interesting, don't you think? Khalid's mind raced. Emily had received an offer that would solve all her family's financial problems and had refused without even considering it. This confirmed everything he believed about her character, but it also meant that Layla had crossed an unacceptable line. If you offered her money and she refused, why are you still here? Khalid asked. Because refusing the first offer is part of the game, dear nephew. No smart woman accepts the first proposal. They always ask for more. Layla gathered the photos. But don't worry, I have other methods. What methods? The restaurant where she works has some documentation issues. A visit from the health department and the Department of Labor could shut it down temporarily. Her mother needs expensive treatment that only private hospitals can offer. Without a job, no way to pay. Khalid stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the marble floor. You will not touch her or her family. I already have, Layla said calmly. The inspection has been triggered. Al-Amir Grill will be visited tomorrow. Unless what? Unless you come with me to Beirut tonight and marry Amira Al-Zahra. She has waited 5 years for you, Khalid. It is a union that will strengthen our commercial position in the Gulf and finally give you the heirs the family needs. Khalid felt nauseous. Amira was his distant cousin, a polite and suitable woman who had been promised to him since adolescence. The marriage made sense in every practical and familial aspect, except for the only one that truly mattered. He felt absolutely nothing for her. "I will not marry Amira," he said firmly. "Then that waitress will lose her job tomorrow, and her mother." Well, without private health insurance, the options are limited. Layla stood up, smoothing her dress. "You have until 6 this evening to decide, Khalid. Either your flight to Beirut or the consequences for this distraction." After Layla left, Khalid remained alone in his office, watching New York City from the 20th floor window. The city bustled below, millions of people living their lives, unaware that on the upper floors, men like him made decisions that could destroy dreams with a single phone call. For the first time in his life, Khalid understood the true weight of power. It wasn't just about getting what he wanted, but about the lives he could destroy in the process. Emily was right. He was dangerous, not out of malice, but because his world operated by cruel rules she didn't even know existed. At 5 in the afternoon, he stood in front of Alamir Grill, watching Emily work through the window. She was laughing at something a customer had said, her eyes shining with a genuine joy that he knew his presence in her life could destroy forever. When she saw him on the sidewalk, something in her expression changed. Perhaps it was the way he stood there, still as a statue, or the visible tension in his shoulders. She dried her hands on her apron and came out to meet him. "Did something happen?" she asked, her concern evident. Khalid watched her for a long moment, memorizing every detail of her face. The way a rebellious strand of hair had escaped her bun, the small, almost imperceptible scar on her chin, the absolute sincerity in her green eyes. "Emily," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need you to know that whatever happens from now on, it's not your fault." She frowned, clearly confused. "Khalid, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" He reached out, lightly touching her face. Emily didn't pull away, and for an infinite moment they just stood there, the world stopping around them. "I should have stayed away from you from the very first day," he whispered. "You were right. I am dangerous." Before Emily could respond, Khalid stepped back and got into the waiting car. As the vehicle pulled away, he saw her through the rear window, standing on the sidewalk, with an expression of complete confusion and something that looked like pain. He didn't know it would be the last time he would see her as a free woman. The next morning, Emily woke up with a sense of foreboding she couldn't explain. Khalid's enigmatic words echoed in her mind, but she tried to focus on the day's tasks. Her mother had had a calmer night, and she had managed to schedule the necessary tests for the following week, even if it meant using all her savings. She arrived at Alamir Grill 15 minutes early, as she always did, but found the owner, Mr. Habib, standing at the entrance with a grim expression. Beside him, 3 men in suits displayed badges from the Health Department and the Department of Labor. "Emily," Mr. Habib said, his voice heavy with sadness. "They came for an inspection. They found irregularities I didn't even know existed." Emily's heart sank. What kind of irregularities? One of the inspectors showed a clipboard full of notes. Delayed employment paperwork, minor structural problems in the kitchen, licenses that need to be renewed, nothing major, but enough for a temporary closure until everything is resolved. "How long?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer would be devastating for her finances. "At least 2 weeks, maybe more, depending on how quickly we can resolve the issues." Mr. Habib approached her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Emily, I'm so sorry. I'll try to resolve everything as quickly as possible, but you know how hard it is to get the money for the fees and repairs. Emily nodded, trying to maintain her composure. 2 weeks without a salary meant not being able to pay for her mother's tests, being late on rent, problems that would pile up like an avalanche. But something about the coincidence of the inspection, coming right after the strange conversation with Khalid, set off an alarm in her mind. Was it a neighbor who made the complaint? She asked the inspector. Anonymous tip, he replied, avoiding her gaze. Came in by phone yesterday afternoon. Emily felt a cold anger spread through her chest. Yesterday afternoon. Exactly when Khalid had shown up with that strange behavior, talking about danger and guilt. Somehow, she knew intuitively that he was involved in this, or at least his family was. In the days that followed, Emily's life unraveled with a surgical precision that couldn't be a coincidence. First came the call from the hospital, informing her that her mother's health plan had been cancelled due to an administrative error that would take weeks to correct. Then the landlord showed up demanding extra building fees he had never mentioned before. Finally, the college informed her that she was behind on tuition payments due to a problem in the scholarship system that had frozen her discount. Each blow was devastating, but Emily recognized the hand behind the orchestration. Someone was using resources and influence to pressure every aspect of her life simultaneously. Someone who wanted to force her into a situation of desperation where she would accept any help offered. It was on a Thursday night, as her mother coughed uncontrollably due to the lack of medication she couldn't afford, that Emily finally broke. Sitting on the floor of the small apartment in Astoria, holding the cold hands of the woman who had sacrificed everything for her, Emily cried all the tears she had held back for days. Habibti, her mother whispered between coughing fits, maybe it's time to accept help. Your pride isn't worth more than my life. The words cut deep because Emily knew her mother was right. It was no longer just about her personal dignity, but about the survival of the only family she had left. It was then that the doorbell rang. Emily opened the door and found Omar Al-Jamil standing in the narrow hallway, wearing simple clothes, but carrying a dignity that seemed to light up the space. Behind him stood Khalid, but there was something different about him. He looked thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders she had never seen before. Assalamu alaikum, ya ibnat, Omar said gently. Peace be upon you, my daughter. Wa alaikum assalam, Emily replied automatically, then straightened up. What are you doing here? We came to apologize, Omar said, entering as she stepped away from the door. And we came to bring a different proposal. Khalid remained silent, his eyes scanning the simple but impeccably clean apartment, stopping on the frail figure of Emily's mother on the couch. When their gazes met, Emily saw something broken in his dark eyes. Emily, Omar said, sitting respectfully in a chair, my son told me about the pressures you have been facing, pressures that my family orchestrated. Your son knew, Emily asked, looking directly at Khalid. He found out, Omar replied, and he made a decision that changed everything. Khalid finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I refused the arranged marriage, publicly, in front of the entire family gathered in Beirut. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. You did what? I said I would not marry my cousin or any other woman they chose. I said that I had found someone who made me want to be a better man, and that I would not give that up for family or for money. Omar nodded in approval. It was a scandal, of course. Layla was furious, threatened to disinherit Khalid, cut off his access to part of the family businesses. But something interesting happened. What? Emily asked, still processing the information. Other family members started to take a stand, Omar continued. Younger cousins who also felt pressured by arranged marriages, aunts who had suffered in silence for decades. Khalid's stand gave a voice to a revolution that had been brewing for years. Khalid approached Emily, but maintained a respectful distance. "Emily, I came here to apologize for the damage my family caused to your life, and to make a proposal that I hope you will consider." "What proposal?" "Marry me," he said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at him as if he had spoken in an unknown language. "Are you insane?" she finally managed to say. "Probably," Khalid admitted, a sad half-smile on his lips. "But let me explain. It's not a traditional proposal, it's a partnership." Omar stood up. "I'll talk with your mother while you two talk," he said diplomatically, heading towards the sofa where the woman was watching everything with wide eyes. Khalid took a deep breath. "Emily, I lost part of my fortune by confronting my family, but I still have considerable resources from what I've built independently. I have an apartment here in New York, businesses that are doing well, and most importantly, I have the protection of the Al-Jamil name, even with the family conflicts. And what does that have to do with me? If you marry me, your mother will have the best medical treatment available. You can finish your degree without worrying about money. You can work in whatever you want, or not work if you prefer to study full-time." He paused. "And I will have by my side someone who knows me for real, who isn't interested in what I own, but in who I can become." Emily shook her head. "Khalid, this isn't a marriage. It's a business contract." "Maybe it starts that way," he admitted. "But it could become something more. Emily, I know you feel something for me. I know because I feel the same way. Something that has been growing since the first day we spoke." She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come out, because it was true. Despite all her resistance, despite all the problems, there was something between them that transcended logic and convenience. "And what if it doesn't work out?" she asked. "Then we will separate as civilized adults, with a prenuptial agreement that guarantees your financial independence regardless of what happens." Omar returned from his conversation with Emily's mother, who was now smiling for the first time in weeks. "Your mother reminded me of what my son seems to have forgotten to mention," he said, looking reproachfully at Khalid. "What?" Emily asked. "That he has been hopelessly in love with you for weeks, but is too proud to admit it," Omar said with a playful glint in his eyes. Khalid blushed slightly. "Father." "Is it true?" Emily asked directly. Khalid stared at her for a long moment before answering. "Yes, completely, hopelessly in love, for the first time in my life." The confession broke Emily's last barrier of resistance. She approached him, lightly touching his face. "Khalid Al-Jamil," she said in Arabic, "you truly are the most complicated man I have ever met." "Is that a yes?" he asked, covering her hand with his. "It's a yes to trying," she replied, "but on one condition. Anything. We do this our way, not the way your family expects, not the way society expects. Our way." Khalid smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in weeks. "Our way," he agreed. 6 months later, Emily Al-Jamil had graduated from law school. Her mother was healthy and strong, and she had opened a small practice specializing in immigrant rights. Khalid had expanded his businesses to include social projects, discovering that using his money to help underserved communities gave him more satisfaction than any corporate acquisition. His family in Lebanon was still divided over the marriage, but Omar had become a staunch defender of Emily, and slowly other family members began to accept that times had changed. On the night of their first wedding anniversary, as they dined at the same Alamir grill where it all began, now renovated and thriving again, Khalid took Emily's hand across the table. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked. Emily looked around the restaurant full of happy customers. thought of her healthy mother at home, of her new clients who now had hope of regularizing their status in the country, and finally looked at the man who had chosen to face his own family for her. "Never," she replied, bringing his hand to her lips. "Not for a second." And when Khalid smiled, Emily knew she had made the right choice. Not because he was rich or powerful, but because she had discovered that beneath all the layers of protection and family expectations, there was a man capable of truly loving. A man who had chosen to grow, to change, and to fight for what really mattered. Together, they had created something new, not a fairy tale about social differences being magically erased, but a real partnership based on love, mutual respect, and the courage to build an authentic life on their own terms.